Okay, hi everyone. We will wait one more minute for people to filter in. Welcome and show a quick video. Enjoy that.
Access Europe helps Irish civil society unlock and manage EU funding. It's a support programme run by The Wheel, providing information, training, help desk support and network building opportunities. The European Union's new multi-annual financial framework will run from 2021 to 2027 and contains a plethora of funding programmes for organisations like yours. These include education and training, youth, sport, citizenship, rights and equality, research and innovation, and the social economy. These programmes will serve the EU's overall objectives of being smarter, greener, more connected, more social and closer to its citizens. Innovative projects undertaken by civil society will play a key role in driving these objectives, but navigating EU funding can be challenging. Join Access Europe today for expert help with accessing EU funding opportunities.
So, hello everyone again. Welcome. I just share my screen. A moment. That was not right. Okay, here we go. Okay, so here we are. Hi, welcome everyone joining us today for a training session on how to write your EU funding application. My name is Christina and I'm the European Programs Officer at The Wheel, and I'm happy to welcome you all here today together with my colleagues Emma and Emily and our two special guests, Mary Moynihan from Smashing Times and Patrick Devine from the Northern and Western Regional Assembly. We are very happy to have you here today. Thanks for joining us. We would, of course, also like to know who you are, so please feel welcome to pop your name into the chat, your organization, where you are from, so that we get an overview who is in the room. Thanks so much. Just as a note in the beginning, you already saw it. We will record this event. We will share the recording with you afterwards, as well as all slides and links. Just to mention, this is a part of a series. For an overview of how EU funding works in general, you're very welcome to watch back the trainings we did, for example, on all EU funding programs, on how you go about designing your project, on how you build a new partnership. You will find all these recordings of all these events on our YouTube channel. And today we focus on writing your EU funding application. This is our agenda for today. First, will Emma share with you what to consider before you actually start writing. Then Patrick Devine is here from the Northern and Western Regional Assembly, and he will tell us more about what evaluators look for in an application. We will have a short break, and afterwards Emma will share grant writing best practices, including the keyword method. And then Mary Moynihan from Smashing Times will talk about her experiences and how she developed the project into a successful application. We reserved also some time in the end for Q&A, and we would like to encourage you to post your questions during the session into the chat box. Either we will answer them directly in the chat or we will answer them in the Q&A session. If you have a very individual question, we would invite you to write an email to us, and we're happy to respond to you directly and individually also. But now let's start, and I hand over to Emma.
Great, thank you so much, Christina, and thank you everybody for joining us. Just give me a moment now and I will share my slides. Okay, great, you should be able to see them there now, and I have to hide some of my little cameras because otherwise it blocks my slides. So as Christina said, this is the last installment in a series, and you will be able to access all of the recordings afterwards. We'll include them in our follow-up email. What we've proposed throughout the kind of the three main sessions that we did, we had a first overview session, and then the three kind of focusing on developing a project sessions. We use these kind of 8 steps, and so you can see that so far what we've covered is in the first session, designing your EU project, we looked at steps 1 to 4, and then we did a whole session about step 5, which is building your partnership. And in this training, we look at those last 3 steps to get you to the point where you're ready to submit your application. But I suppose it's important to note that the grant writing process is not perfectly linear. There are some things that we'll be kind of touching back on that we've covered in previous sessions. This is just, you know, we'll mention a few of the things that we've covered. So before we get writing, I do want to kind of look back before we get to that step 6 of let's get writing. I do want to kind of look back on a few things that you would have had to have just had in place in order to be ready for this step in the process. And just to note as well, if you haven't seen those previous sessions, don't worry about it. As I said, you'll get all of the recordings afterwards, and this can still kind of function as a standalone session, in that the advice is applicable whether you were at the previous ones or not. So let's just, as I said, have a very quick look at what you will need to have done before you reach this step. So what you need in order to be ready to start writing. So the first thing is your concept note is finalized with your partners with basic work packages. So we talked about this during the design phase, and you can watch back the design your EU project session to learn lots more about concept notes and how you translate kind of an idea that you might have into an actual kind of solid outline for a project and separate it into some kind of work packages. So this is done during that design phase. At the beginning, you would have your own concept note where you came up with the idea, you put it down on paper, and then you use that to reach out to partners. But as we covered during the building your partnership session, it is good practice then to allow your partners to feed in and kind of give ideas and share their tips and what they'd like to see in the project, so that, you know, it's more of a kind of collectively designed endeavor. So, you know, you need to allow time for all of your partners to kind of feed in, but there has to be a point where you stop tweaking and you stop kind of adjusting and introducing new concepts and new ideas. There has to be a point where, you know, you say, right, okay, everybody's had their say. We've all had a chance to kind of weigh in and give our opinions. This is the latest concept note. Are we all happy with this? Is it okay for me to get writing based on this concept note? And hopefully all of your partners would say, yeah, absolutely, go for it. So the other thing that you need before you get writing is the relevant info from all of your partners. So again, you'll have done this during the partnership building phase. So as I said, you can watch back and look at that. We'll actually have a look at more detail about what exactly is this information that you need from your partners. We'll have a look at that in the next slide. But this is something that you would have done earlier in the process, kind of gathering up all of that info from their partners, because this is the info that you need to inform your writing. So all of these are the things that you need before you start that whole writing process. Definitely spend some time making some editable templates for the application, for your budget, for your Gantt chart. So this will completely depend on the program that you're applying for. They all have different kind of application systems and budget structures. Some actually use Word forms. So programs like the Serve program, for example, they often use Word, so you don't need to create a new template, but others use kind of online portals like Erasmus Plus, which can be difficult to work with, in that, you know, you can't leave comments or highlight things, or, you know, it's not easy for multiple partners to work on it at the same time. So in which case, you know, you need to kind of, well, I would advise that you spend a bit of time making a good quality editable template on Word or something like that that you can work with for the co-writing phase, and then allocate time later on in the process to kind of copy and paste into their portal. So definitely it makes sense to spend some time making really good quality editable templates, because it'll make your life easier down the line than doing something that's a bit rough, and then, you know, when you end up with a very long, unwieldy document, it can be difficult to deal with. The next thing is your rough timeline and budget. You should also kind of have a reasonable idea of this before you get writing. This can change, obviously, throughout the writing process. You might decide, as you're writing the project, you might decide to kind of scale up or scale down an activity, or kind of adjust something here or there. Like, that's absolutely normal as you're writing. Of course, the more you kind of think about and
and explain an activity, you're going to realize that maybe you overlooked little bits or pieces, or actually this isn't, this doesn't really make sense, or we're going to move this to a different stage in the timeline of the project, and that's totally fine. But it's good to have kind of that rough timeline and budget confirmed in your own head to kind of help steer your writing, but also amongst your partners, and just, I suppose, warn them that this is a proposed, or the kind of first draft of the timeline and budget. It might change depending on how the project shapes up, but get general sign off that if I use this as my starting point and send you an updated one later, are you happy with that? And most of the time they'll say, yeah, that's no problem at all. So what I always do then, as I'm actually writing the application, this is just a little side tip when it comes to timelines and budgets and stuff like that. I'll, if there's something to do with specific dates, like, oh, we launch a website in month 6 of the project, I always just kind of highlight any of those details as I'm going along, like dates or budgets or anything that's very specific. Because then if I do need to come back and adjust them later on, it's easy to do. And it also means that I don't get tied up in those details as I'm writing. You want to try and avoid things that are going to trip you up as you're writing. And you want to be able to kind of get it written and then come back and worry about those little details later. So that's another thing. And then at the end, you'll have once you've actually written the project and you've made all of your adjustments, you can update your timeline and budget and send it around to your partners. But having an original kind of idea of how it's going to go is probably the best way to go about it. The next thing you can do is use cloud-based software to co-write. So I always use Google Drive, but I know sometimes people use Teams and Dropbox and things like that. So this is definitely recommended, because you don't, particularly when you're working with multiple partners, dealing with attachments to emails and looking at feedback from multiple different attachments is just a bit of a mess. So if you can look at a cloud-based solution, that can be best. So there's some things to consider before you actually start writing. Once you have all of these firmed up, you're kind of ready to get started. So the next thing, as I said, I did want to just kind of touch briefly on this. What info do you actually need from your partners to get started? So this is, I've mentioned this before throughout this series. It's not an absolute exact science, but this is what I always kind of look for when I'm building partnerships with partners or applying for projects together. The first thing I look for is just general partner information. This is pretty standard. Most of them who have been involved in European projects will even have a document with all of this easily to hand. But you need to look at your background. You need some information about who are they as an organization, their aims, their objectives, kind of a general overview, any relevant activities that they have that are relevant to this project, their track record of whether it's EU funding or other projects. Staff profiles can be really good. I usually try to include a staff profile of 2 to 3 relevant people who would actually be involved in this project if it was funded, and who would be involved in managing it. And then relevant EU info. So this can depend on the programs, but you might see OID numbers or PIC numbers. So OID numbers are organizational ID numbers. When you register your organization for EU funding, you'll get an OID number. They used to be called PIC participant identification codes. At the moment, when you log in, you can see both of them. You can see your OID number and your PIC number. So all of that information should be to hand if they're registered. And sometimes sometimes the application will ask for any of their kind of past projects. So like codes to their past projects and things like that. So that's the kind of general background information that you need. That's asked for explicitly in the application. So you'll be able to see exactly what you need from them in order to be able to fill that into the application. So what I usually do is create a template and ask them to fill it out with all of this information, so that I can then kind of copy and paste it or transfer it over to kind of the one application document that I'm looking for. If you're using a cloud-based thing as well, I suppose they could copy and paste it directly in themselves. The next thing that I always look for is project-specific information. So this is where you kind of get them to do a little bit of research and get them to do a little bit of work into, what the situation is nationally. So I usually put together kind of a template of maybe 10 questions where I kind of ask them about what's the national context in relation to this project here. So recently I wrote a project about social enterprise. So I asked about what's the social enterprise ecosystem in their country, what's available in terms of supports to social enterprise. Is there other initiatives that are available in your country that this project could potentially complement? What are the needs of social enterprises in your country? Then I looked at specific expertise and relevance. So how would they, as partners, what expertise do they have in this area? In this case, it was social enterprise, but it can be whatever your topic is on. How are they going to add value? How are they going to make sure that the results of this project are sustainable in their country? What are they going to do to add to the sustainability? What kind of impact can they guarantee, in their own national context? And then the other thing, of course, is their reach and their network and their capacity. So, if they were to join this project, what, are they part of any networks? How will they disseminate it? How many people do they reach throughout their work? Even things like how many people tend to attend their events or, sign up to newsletters or social media and things like that. So you have to get a bit of a picture of how they will disseminate the project and what network they have, because then all of this information makes it easy for you to talk about it. Once you have all of that, you can then talk about it in the application confidently, and kind of make sure that throughout the application, you're kind of sprinkling in these details at all points to show that, I suppose, it's a cohesive project, that all the partners have done their research, all the partners have, done a bit of an audit about what's available nationally, and they're thinking strategically about how they're going to use the project. So all of this information can be really handy for you then as the project writer to be able to weave it in. So that's the general kind of info that you need from your partners. And so you've kind of covered all of those main things that you need before you get writing. So you need your concept note, you need your relevant info, you need to have a good template, you need to have your rough timeline and budget, and you need to have some kind of cloud-based software in order to co-write together in an easy way. The next thing to do right before you get writing is to make sure that you have a very close look at the evaluation criteria of the project. So just to bear in mind that, every EU funding call will include a kind of section on the evaluation criteria. So you can see very clearly, and they're very transparent about how they're going to evaluate your project and what they're looking for and how many marks are available for which type of, for which part of the evaluation. So a very typical kind of criteria that you'd see would be things like relevance, quality, and impact. And they'll tell you how many points are available for each of those, and how it's weighted throughout the different ones. We'll have a little look at relevance now in a minute. But what you need to be thinking of is, how do you specifically demonstrate that you are addressing these criteria throughout your application? So you can see that I have this wonderful image here of this fruitcake. So when you're making a fruitcake, you don't want to just sprinkle the fruit on top as an afterthought. The idea is that it should be evenly dispersed throughout your cake in this instance, but it's the same with the evaluation criteria. When it comes to writing your project, you want to make sure that it's evenly dispersed throughout your application, that you're constantly coming back to, why is this relevant? How are you going to focus on quality? How are you going to focus on impact? That, that's kind of unavoidable throughout your application, or that there's a little bit of it in every bite of your application, if we're going to stick with our cake metaphor, or whatever other obviously evaluation criteria. You want to just make it, the point is to try and make it easy for the evaluator to give you points. They're reading your whole application, looking for the relevance, looking for the quality, looking for the impact. So you want to try and make it easy for them to do that. I have reviewed applications before where it's kind of obvious that the person hasn't read the evaluation criteria, because, for example, in some programs, they'll give specific points for things like dissemination. How are you going to communicate the project and promote the project and kind of embed it locally and stuff like that? So this is your things like your websites, your social media, your newsletter, your events, your outreach, your collaboration with what are called multipliers, like people who could help to multiply the impact of your project. And they specifically say, we have, 20 points to give to this thing. And what I find then when I'm reviewing to the application is that they've barely kind of answered this question at all. They've barely said anything about dissemination. And when I ask them, are you going to do you have dissemination plans for this project, like things like websites and social media? They're always like, oh yeah, of course we do that. We do that with every project. But they didn't mention it in the application. They kind of assumed that it was a given. They were so focused on the kind of guts of the project, the real subject matter, that they kind of neglected to mention dissemination, because to them it's like, oh yeah, of course we do that. But this would be a huge mistake, because the evaluator is looking for dissemination throughout the project. It's one of the core evaluation criteria. So, they can't give you points for something that's not there. Even if it's something that you would definitely have done, they can't give you the points if it's not there. So very important to read the evaluation criteria and make time to make sure that you give time and pay attention in your application, not just to the stuff that you deem as important, the innovation in the project or the value of it or the impact it'll have, but what they think is important, what the evaluator has said that they want to see in your application. So that's very important. And I highlighted relevance there because I want to come back on that. I did, touch on this in the Designing Your EU Project session that we ran earlier. So I won't go back over it in huge detail, but it is important. So I just wanted to touch on it again. So when we were talking about designing the EU project, we were looking at how do you decide whether to go for a project or not, whether it's a good fit for your organization. So at all times, it's about weighing up whether there's a good overlap between your strategic objectives as an organization and the strategic objectives of the funder. If it's all about the funder's priorities and there's nothing really in it for you, it's a waste of your time because it's not going to have any impact. If it's all about your priorities and there's no clear connection to the funder's priorities, then again, it's a waste of your time because they'll see through that and they won't fund it. So a perfect funding opportunity is one where you can easily demonstrate the connection between how this is going to benefit your organization and how it's going to deliver on the objectives of the program. So it's that kind of sweet spot in the middle, and it should be a no-brainer. You shouldn't have to stretch and kind of justify why this is applicable. But remember, I put that little asterisk in at the end there because remember, it's their investment, and in the actual application itself, as much as, internally you're going to be weighing up the funder's priorities versus your priorities and making that decision. When you're writing the application, remember that this is their money and it's what's in it for them. Of course, you're going to say, obviously, this is very strategically aligned with our organization and it would be a very exciting opportunity and all that kind of stuff. That's grand. But throughout your application, you're bringing it back again and again to their priorities. What's in it for them? How are you going to help them to deliver on the purpose of the program? So, it is their money. You want to make sure that, they're the ones that are taking the risk. You want to make it kind of what I always kind of say is abundantly and unavoidably clear that this project will deliver on the key objectives of this fund. And it will be highly impactful and it will be high quality and whatever else they ask for in the scoring criteria, you want to make that really, really clear to them. And don't be subtle about it. Sometimes people kind of say it once, they just kind of allude to it at the beginning and then they kind of go off and explain the whole project and they never really return to it again. But again, you don't want to be subtle for something that's so important, the relevance, the how it's going to deliver for them. How it's going to be such an excellent investment for them to make. You want to make it very, very clear throughout the application how this is going to come back to the purpose, to the core objectives of the funding call. And you have to remember that they have dozens, if not hundreds of applications to review. So you want to you know, evaluators are people too. You know, you want to make it easy for them. You want to make their job easy by bringing it back, making it clear, and making it easy for them to give you the marks, because they're very transparent. They tell you exactly what they're going to be looking for and how many points is available for each section. So they've kind of made it abundantly clear to you. Now, as the grant writer, you're making their lives easier by showing them again and again, you know, I'm giving you what you're looking for. I'm making it easy for you to see what I'm proposing here. But with that, when we talk about evaluators are people too, let's hand over to evaluators. So we're very lucky to have Patrick Devine here, who's the EU Projects Officer at the Northern and Western Regional Assembly, which is the contact point for a couple of different Interreg programs, I think. Patrick, you'll be able to correct me there, but yeah, Patrick is going to give us a little bit of the kind of insight into what it's like from the other side of the house, I suppose, as somebody who's evaluating and assessing applications and making decisions about whether they're a good investment for the funding that they're responsible for. So Patrick, I'm going to stop share and I'm going to hand over to you because I know you have a few slides that you want to share.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. Can you see the full screen there?
Yeah, we can.
Okay. Yeah, hello everyone. As Emma said, my name is Patrick Devine from the Northern Western Regional Assembly. Our headquarters is in Ballahadreen in County Roscommon, and we're one of 3 regional assemblies in Ireland. So there's another Southern Regional Assembly is based in Waterford, and the Eastern and Midland Regional Assembly is based in Ballymun in Dublin. And I suppose each of the regional assemblies are national contact points for different programs. So I'm the national contact point for Interreg Northern, Periphery and Arctic program, and also the Atlantic Area program. And together, along with the Southern Regional Assembly, we share the national contact point for Interreg Europe projects. So what I would say is my, I suppose, presentation and tips for writing projects from the perspective of the evaluators. My views and tips are very much shaped by Interreg programs. So I'm conscious that there's lots of other EU programs that you'll be looking at, but I think a lot of the advice and tips are common across most programs. So I suppose the first thing I would say is and this is not to put people off projects. You know, my job is really to try and promote, wear the green jersey in terms of getting Irish organizations to apply and be successful in Interreg programs. But one thing I think, and Emma touched on it there, it's very important to, instead of diving in and thinking that you could get funding, it's very important to do your research and make sure that what your organization and what the problem you're trying to solve aligns to the program. And I think that's very important to do that. So and usually when you go on the website and you see if there's a call, they'll explain what the thematic objective of the program is. So, and I'll give you an example would be Northern, Periphery and Arctic program is very much focused on, say, the Northern Western part of Ireland, but along with Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Finland and Sweden, and working with them to solve problems. And it's very much, the clue is in the name, I suppose, in terms of Northern, Periphery and Arctic. It's like rural, peripheral regions. So challenges faced by people that living in sparsely populated areas. The other program I'm responsible for is Atlantic Area. And again, that's all of Ireland is eligible for that, but it's very much focused on the projects are based around problems out in to do with the sea and marine life and ports and stuff like that there. So I think it's very important to check that your project and what you're aiming to do fits with the proposal or with the program theme and the policy and the specific objectives. And I'll touch on later on what I mean by that. Secondly, the work packages that you're developing as part of the project, you want to make sure that they align to the document, and that's something that the evaluators will be looking at throughout it. And generally, in Interreg projects as well, you'll have a mix of different partners from different regions in Europe, and each of them will be bringing something to the table or different value. So, for example, in a lot of Interreg projects, you see a university, you might see a civil society organization, and you might see a public authority. And so say, for example, the civil society organization might be bringing the connection or the network with the citizens or businesses or something like that there. And the university is bringing the expert knowledge, and then the public authority would be bringing the policy element to it. So it's very much, I suppose, important to that your work package aligns with what you're trying to do, but also explain what value you're bringing to the project. Is your type of organization a good fit? I think this is important. And this in Interreg, you'll hear this thing called quadruple helix model, and basically means is the projects ideally should have this mix of a government body, such as like a county council, a university or institute of technology, and then community, which could be like a civil society organization or a charity, and then an industry, so like private organizations. But when I say private, sometimes actually we find that a lot of like something like a chamber of commerce or some sort of like non-profit body is actually the kind of representing industry, because they have a network of businesses that they will have as stakeholders. And then the last point to make here is, how can the project add value to your organization, and how can you add value to the project? So I think that's very important. When you're writing the application, you want to show how your organization is adding value to the project partnership. But at the same time, you obviously, I think ultimately it's almost a waste of your time if you're being involved in these projects if it can't add value to what your mission is and what your organization does. An example of a policy alignment that I referred to is, so for example, the Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic program, there has a number of priorities, and the first one is strengthening the innovation capacity for resilient and attractive NPA communities. So this is the priority, and then under this priority, they have 3 specific objectives. So this is an example of what your project, in the application phase, you'll need to select one of these specific objectives. And that really is really important, because everything you write in the application really needs to align to what this is. And then if you look at the program manual or the terms of the call, you'll see that, for example, looking here at 1.3, for example, about sustainable growth and competitiveness for SMEs, one of the output indicators or results, they'll have suggested output indicators, but they might be that you engaged with a number of SMEs, or you held a number of workshops, or you helped businesses develop new products or export or something. So it's very important to bear that in mind, that the outputs of your project link back to the specific objective. And just, sorry, that's just a touch on within Interreg, the funding is all dictated by this thing called cohesion policy. And as some of you might be familiar, that the European funding runs in 7-year cycles. So the last one was the 2014 to 2020 period. We're now in the 2021 to 2027 period. And these are the 5 policy objectives that all Interreg programs and any what we call European territorial cooperation programs are based upon. And you'll find that most EU programs are linked to 1 or 2 of these policy objectives. So it's very important to bear that in mind in your application as well when you're writing it. When you're applying for, as I say, I think research is so important. Before you dive into a project and start writing or start looking for project partners, it's very important that you study the program manual and the terms of the call to see that you're a good fit. The Interreg programs have different co-financing requirements. So for example, Interreg Northwest Europe is at 60%, Interreg Northern Periphery and Arctic is 65%, and Atlantic area is at 75%. So different programs have different co-financing rates, and it's very important to identify, I suppose, this early on, discuss it with management and internally how you're going to co-finance the project. But for example, in the Interreg projects, quite often the co-financing rate is actually your own staff resources and time. So a lot of the Interreg programs, a significant part of the budget is made up of staff. So if, for example, you will have a total budget of say 100,000, you will be eligible for the costs in terms of you'll be paying your staff anyway. But at the end of the 6 months or the year, whenever the reporting period is, you'll be submitting a claim for the costs. And then if the co-financing rate by the program is 65%, say for example an Interreg NPA, you'll get 65% of the staff cost that you submitted back. So you're co-financing the program by 35%. But realistically, if it's your own staff, you would have had those staff costs anyway. So that's, I suppose, what we mean by co-financing. But that's in the case of Interreg. Different programs like Horizon Europe and all different have all sorts of different co-financing models. So it's very important to understand that before you apply. Does the legal status of your organization meet the requirements to be a partner or lead partner? I think this is kind of important. I suppose to lead an Interreg program, you need to be a public body, but also that's something the evaluators will be looking at, is the legal status of your organization. So if you're, say for example, a non-profit, you might be limited by guarantee, or you might be a DAC, or you might be a CLG or something like that there. And something like a DAC is not a European-wide thing, so sometimes it might be worth explaining, putting a line or two to explain what that is. And I think this is something maybe the evaluators are looking for, is the liquidity of a business, or an organization, sorry, so that they know that, because essentially you're having to bankroll the project for a year until you claim back the costs. So it's very important that you're able to convince the evaluators in the application that your organization is capable of doing that. And then the last point is just that research, understand what the work packages and deliverables should be, and that it aligns to the project objectives and the theme of the program as well. Just some small, how many for time, Emma? Okay, yeah. Writing the application. What is the problem you're trying to solve? I think that is really, really important. And I would have made this mistake before, where you lose sight of what the problem you're trying to solve. And evaluators can kind of see this if you're almost applying just for the sake of trying to get funding or something. The problem you're solving really needs to align to what the theme of the program and the specific objective. So it's very important to bear that in mind right throughout the application. And explain why you need the project to solve the problem as well. That's very important. Explain why transnational cooperation enables you to solve the problem and achieve the results. So again, Interreg is short for interregional. So Interreg is really focused on the interregional knowledge exchange process. So each Interreg program has a partnership made up of yourself and other partner organizations in other regions across Europe. So it's very important to demonstrate why you need to be part of that cooperation and that partnership. And that's the only way that you can really solve the problem that you're trying to do through the project. So an example might be that you might have a network of businesses that you work with, or volunteers or something like that there. And you have the network, but you don't have the like technical knowledge to try and solve a problem. But by being in a partnership that has a university, the university, say in another country like Finland or Spain or something, they're bringing the expert knowledge. So it's very important to convey why you need to be part of a transnational cooperation in terms of to solve the problem. Make sure the work packages are realistic. I suppose, as Emma was saying, the evaluators do have a good bit of experience. They know what is realistic and achievable, and it's very tempting to probably overpromise when you're writing applications, because you really want to succeed, but be careful not to overpromise and then not be able to deliver when it actually comes to the project. Who are the key stakeholders? In Interreg programs, stakeholders are really important, because you usually have to set up some sort of stakeholder group that you're working with nationally in Ireland. A lot of the Interreg programs have a budget for you to travel to other partner regions. So generally you'll be taking stakeholders with you. But you demonstrating that you have a good relationship with stakeholders in Ireland is actually quite important to demonstrate in the application, because evaluators will want to know that you're able to deliver the project. So for example, you might need to have a good relationship with the county council or some government body or something like that there, or another state agency, to be able to, so you have to demonstrate that as well. Who's your target audience, and who will the project benefit? So is it citizens, is it SMEs, or is it a combination of both? Give yourself plenty of time to identify project partners. This is probably one of the most time-consuming and challenging things in an developing Interreg projects, is building the partnership and identifying the right partners. And it's very much like a dating matchmaking process. In the project as well, you want to explain the long-term impact. So generally, Interreg projects are between 3 to 4 years, but the evaluators will expect you to show that the impact of the project will outlive the actual project itself, so it'll have a long-term impact. And explain the value for money as well. That's something that's usually a very important part of the assessment criteria in all the projects. Other considerations just are be relevant of EU national and local policies. You don't need to be an expert, but it's good to do a bit of research. And if you're able to show that what you're doing through the project is kind of helping to work towards the objectives of these policies, that usually kind of scores your points and ticks a few boxes. So it's important to it's no harm in citing things like for this current program, the EU, they have a thing called the EU Green Deal. And it's all about how to become a low carbon or net zero carbon economy, by 2050. So that's a huge high level objective for the EU, but that also becomes a national objective, and it also becomes an objective for the county and city councils in Ireland. So it's very important for you to explain how your project achieves that. Include references to, as I said, things like European policies, but even things right down to like the local economic and community plans. And every county and city in Ireland has a local economic and community plan. Get in touch with the national contact point. They tend to have a lot of expertise, and they'll give you a lot of tips sometimes, and they'll give you advice about writing the application as well. And the other thing I would say is most programs tend to have a directory, a list of previously approved projects, and it's worth looking for that on them for inspiration, but also it gives you an idea of why they were successful in the past. And just quickly to say, these are kind of the Interreg programs that are open to Irish organizations. So at the top, you have Interreg Europe, that covers all of Europe. So it's usually partnerships of say like 7 to 10 or sometimes even 11 or 12 partners. And there's a current call open for that at the minute. Interreg NPA, as I said, the other 3 projects or programs at the bottom then are what we call transnational. So they have a specific geography. So Interreg NPA is a good portion of Ireland, and then things like countries like Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Finland, and Sweden, and the Faroe Islands. And Northwest Europe is all of Ireland and parts of, as you can imagine, Northwest Europe, France, parts of Belgium. And then Interreg Atlantic area is all the basically Atlantic area from Ireland right down to Spain, France, Spain, and Portugal. And now we don't know when that call will be launched, but it'll probably be more likely the end of the summer at this stage. But those are a few, and there's the links to the website if you want to go on and find out more information about the calls. I don't know if anyone any questions, or will I leave the questions? So Emma, you said they might be in the chat, is it?
Yeah, well, I suppose we can, if there are any questions, we will have allocated time for questions later on in the call. And if Patrick, if you're available to hang around and questions come in, then we can pose them to you then. But if you're not available, don't worry, we can just send people your way with your email address.
Yeah.
As well. So yeah, and if there, I can't see anything coming in now, so I'd say we're probably all right, and we can wait until later.
I can hang about and if you have any questions.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much, Patrick. And that was just excellent, and just comes back to, I think that the focusing on the problem and the gaps and stuff like that, that was something we talked about during the designing your EU project phase, in terms of looking at what is the problem, what is your proposed solution, and what impact would it have, kind of thing. And I suppose the other thing to note is that, you know, all of those factors, somebody's asking, can you have a copy of the slides? Absolutely, all slides will be shared afterwards, so that's no problem. But just in terms of all of those, you know, those things that they have to think about, like policy and value for money, and why this needs to be an EU funded project, you know, why it should be transnational, all of those things. They're all, you know, very, very important points, but I think in fairness to evaluators and to the programs, they do ask you all of those things in the application. You don't have to try and remember it all. You know, they'll clearly ask you, and we have a look at an example question now. You know, they do give you a lot of hints about what they want to see, like when they ask, why does this project have to be transnational? They give you some kind of hints about, you know, things that you might say and stuff like that. So I suppose it's not like you have a completely blank slate going in there when you're writing the project. The programs do ask you specifically what they want to see, and they do give you a lot of information and things like that. So that's important to know as well, that you won't have to try and, you know, the application itself will steer you in the right direction, as long as you answer the questions properly, I suppose. So that's great. Thank you so much, Patrick. I really appreciate that, and you were bang on time as well. So I think this is the first time we've been as good to schedule. So let's try and keep it up. I do think we're going to take a 10-minute break now, because we're going to get into the next section now in a little bit, which is the actual kind of practical tips for just good writing, kind of across the board in grants, but specifically a little bit tailored more to EU grants. So we're going to get into that very shortly, and then we're going to have a case study from an organisation that are very successful at writing EU funded projects. So we look at that shortly, but I do think we had a quick poll that we wanted to do before we went. So I don't know, Emily, if you want to hop in, and we'll leave the poll up and everybody can vote, and we can share the results afterwards. So it just asks, how much grant writing experience, EU or otherwise, do you have? Or maybe we can share the results now, because I think we have time. We're, you know, as I said, I'm not used to running so well to schedule. We'll see what comes up, and then we can take a proper 10-minute break and let people have a little bit of a walk and a breather. Is there anybody else? Now is your chance to vote. I can see there's a few left. Okay. I think, is that all of them? Yeah, okay. We'll end the poll now, and we can share the results. So I think you can see there that about 48% have no grant writing experience yet. 42% have some grant writing experience, and 10% have lots. So we have a nice mixture there in the room. We're pitching this more at beginner, but hopefully there'll be something for everybody, even those few that have lots. You'll be able to, it'll be a nice refresher for you. So look, as I said, we'll get into the proper, you know, actual tips for good writing shortly. Did I share the results properly? Yeah, I did. Okay, there you go. You can see the results. But yeah, we'll dive into the next section after the break. But for now, we're going to take a quick 10-minute break. So I think we can all come back at 11 if you're happy with that. So we'll be back at 11. Make sure you get up, have a bit of a stretch, and we'll see you back here shortly. Okay, thanks everyone. Hi everyone, you're very welcome back. I think we can all, what time is it now? It's bang on 11, so I think we can get started with the next part of the session. I see that there is a couple of questions for Patrick. We will get to them during the Q&A session, so just bear with us, but we're going to go straight on, seeing as we're on schedule. We will keep going on to the next part of today's session. Hold on, I have to stop here and share again, which is about, I suppose, the actual process of some good grant writing tips and tricks. So just bear with us for 1 second while I share. Okay, so before the break, we looked at all of the different kind of things you need to have arranged before you get do the process of kind of getting writing. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry, there's a bit of background noise there. Okay, so we looked at everything that you need to do in order to get writing. So now we're going to look at some of the tips and tricks that you need during the writing process. So the first thing to look at is the general EU grant writing rules. So these are just some kind of, in no particular order, these are things to remember when you're writing EU grants. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the European dimension. So this is what we talk about in terms of justifying, you know, why does this project need to be EU funding? Why can't you get it funded nationally? What is the value to having it at EU level? If it is, like, most projects require partnership, most EU funded projects require some level of partnership. So if there is, you know, if it's one of those projects that require partnership, what's the value of the partnership? Why do this at EU level? So we will look at kind of that European dimension, and as well as that, I suppose the kind of connection with EU policy, how you're going to reach an EU audience and kind of ensure impact around the EU. So we will look at that in closer detail in the next slides, but just to be aware that that is key throughout when you're writing an EU funded project. The other thing that we've touched on before is the whole "it's not about you" thing. So I touched on that before the break. I won't keep going on about it, but just remember that, you know, it is their money. It's about their priorities, their goals, how you're going to help them reach their objectives. The only reason I keep kind of mentioning this is because I've reviewed applications where organizations have written at length about the impact that this is going to have for them and for their organization. And that's great. You should definitely mention that, but remember that front and center are their priorities and how you're going to help them. So just remember that. The next thing is one that I say all the time. This, you might have heard of it before, this KISS principle. So keep it simple, stupid, or keep it stupid, simple, depends on which definition you look up of that acronym. But basically, the other mistake that I see people doing as they're writing projects is they kind of get overexcited and they think, oh, you know, we'll add this and we'll add that, and oh, wouldn't it be great if we did this? If you remember before the break, we looked at, and when we were in the designing the EU project phase, you know, you go to your partners with a very solid idea. If you don't have a solid idea when you go to your partners, then it can become a little bit of a free-for-all and everybody throws in their objectives and then you don't have a cohesive project. So you start with a very solid idea that is well thought out, and you do that by filling out a concept note, and we can forward you on. You know, we've talked about it at length in previous sessions, so we won't keep explaining it here, but we'll include the template for that in the follow-up, and you'll be able to use it. You know, it's just a general tool. You can create your own one as well, but it encourages you to put structure onto your project. So, you know, you want to have a really good solid project when you go to your partners. Then you want to allow for a little bit of flexibility, not a free-for-all, but a little bit of flexibility in terms of their ideas and suggestions. And then you want to have a final concept note, which is what you base your project writing off of. Try and stick to that. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of flexibility as you're writing and you're realizing, oh, maybe that timeline doesn't work, or maybe we'll push that forward in the project, or actually that doesn't make sense, or, you know, we don't really have time to do that in this project. That's totally normal. But what you want to avoid is going a bit mad as you're writing the project and adding in bits and pieces, or getting overexcited about the funding opportunity in general and designing this big monster of a project
that is way too ambitious, that can't really be delivered in the time frame or for that budget. But I think people sometimes, they see a funding opportunity and it's so bang on what they want to do that they feel like this is their only opportunity to shove in all of their objectives into this one project. I would say that's a mistake. Keep it simple. Keep your project concept simple and straightforward. Don't overcomplicate it. Resist the urge to start adding extra things and bells and whistles and things like that. Keep your concept straightforward, achievable. What I always say is ambitious but achievable. It should challenge you a little bit, but not completely overwhelm you to be able to deliver this project. And remember that a project can just be the first step in an overall kind of strategy to continue it. So, maybe your goal is to create a kind of one-stop shop, all-inclusive service for, for people who are excluded from employment. Well, you're not going to get all of that in one project. So what's the first thing you need to do? And do a project based on that, and then be strategic. And you can even explain in your application how this is just the first step in our overall ambition. Later down the line, we'll be looking to expand on different areas and add new projects. And, this might be something that develops over 5 years or 10 years, but try to resist the urge to shove everything into one project, because that's a mistake that I think people make very frequently, is feeling like they either feel like they have to overcomplicate it and add all of these things in order for it to be impressive, or they feel it's their only chance and that they need to shove everything they've ever wanted into this one funding proposal. The other mistake that I see people making a lot is not being specific enough about, for everything you need to have sources and support and evidence, but you also need to, if you say that you're going to do something, be specific about it. Where we look at that in more detail, where it's that understanding the whole picture, like invoking your inner toddler. It's kind of the same thing as in, who, what, why, where, like all of those questions. You need to imagine that there's some little kid beside you going, and who's going to do that? And why are you doing that? And when are we going to do that? And how much is that going to be? Well, toddler wouldn't ask that. But, these are the kind of questions that you need to ask yourself to be as specific as possible. And when it comes to things like target groups, the mistake that I often see is people saying, oh, we're going to target young people. And it's like, well, okay, young people from the EU's definition, that's everything from about 12 to 30. So that's not a very specific target group. And, where are these people coming from? What specific type of people? Another one I saw was people saying, oh, people experiencing homelessness. Again, like that's a huge cohort of people. Your project should be specifically targeting a group of people, and you should demonstrate why these people specifically need this support and how you're going to reach them and how you have a unique access to them or a unique understanding of their issue or their problems, and how your proposal is going to help. So the more specific you can be about your target group and about your KPIs, that's the other thing. Like, we will hold an event, like that's great, but like how many people and when, and what's the impact of it going to be? So the one thing I see people shying away from is setting KPIs. They don't want to put kind of exact numbers on things, because then you're kind of committed to it. But from the funder's perspective, you have to imagine, like, if you say, oh, we're going to have an event and we're going to aim to reach people in this area, like from their perspective, how do they know if it's a good investment? This could be 10 people, it could be 100 people. They have no idea, because you haven't given them any indication. So how do they know that's a good value? How do they know that's a good investment if you're not going to give them a ballpark figure? So I think sometimes people kind of shy away from KPIs, but it's essential. That's how they know whether this project is kind of appropriate for the funding that it's requesting. So again, it's that being ambitious but realistic, and the best thing to do is kind of undershot a little bit. Look at what you'd be confident that you can get, undershot a little bit, and then if you get more, great, they're going to be delighted, but you're not going to be overly pushing yourself. The other thing is read and answer the question. This kind of always gives me flashbacks to my Leave Insert days, because I think teachers were always kind of blue in the face telling us to read the question and answer the question. We look at that in a little bit more detail. We look at this keyword method in a moment. That really kind of helps, I think, with that situation, particularly with EU funded projects where as I said to Patrick earlier, they do give you a lot of hints about what they want to see in the answer to your question. Their questions are very comprehensive, but they can also be a bit overwhelming because they ask for a lot of stuff. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. We've looked at invoking your inner toddler, asking those questions, having it clear. That's not just about, I suppose, well, in a sense, it is about reassuring the funder that you have thought about these details of who and when and where and what and how and all of those things. That's all important. And it reassures the funder that, like, okay, these people really know what they're doing. They've thought about everything. It's in good hands. There's no ambiguity here. But it's also good for yourself in case you get the funding and then you actually have to deliver it. If you haven't thought about those things, you're going to be quite overwhelmed once the project kicks off, because none of that has been defined. So yeah, as much the more clarity you can give at application stage, the better for the funder, in that they're confident you've thought of all these things, and the better for you down the line. And then using reputable sources and quoting their own policy back at them. So I suppose if you're saying that something is a problem and there's an issue, or that you believe that this approach will work in order to tackle this specific problem, you should have reputable sources to back it up. I mean, your word on its own is probably not going to be good enough. There should be some evidence as to why you believe that your approach will work. So use those reputable sources at all times. And then, as Patrick said, kind of tying it in with their own policy. And we'll have a look at that now, actually, in the next slide when we talk about that kind of EU dimension, because sometimes people are a little bit unsure about, okay, well, how do you kind of tie in the policy? And, that can seem a little bit intimidating if you haven't done it before, but I'll show you, I suppose, how easy it can be. So just looking in general at the EU dimension, so read the document, it'll refer to the relevant EU policy, and it will provide a rationale for why the EU is providing this funding. So when we talk about, all of those tips that Patrick is giving and all of those tips that I've given there, they do help you. They're all there. They're all in the call document. They're all in the application. They try and make it as easy for you as possible. When we talk about, make sure that you're quoting the relevant EU policy, that can sound very intimidating, but it's all there. It's in the call document. And we'll show you that now in a minute about how actually easy it is to do that. Provide the EU context, not just the Irish context. So if you remember from before the break, when I was saying, you need to get the information from your partners, what's the story in their country? How is this going to meet their needs? So that kind of thing, what I see in applications is, and in Ireland we do that, and in Ireland this would be really good, and in Ireland, and it's like, this shouldn't be an EU project, because the person writing it obviously just wants this funding for their community in Ireland. So you need to constantly kind of bring it back to how it's going to impact all of your partners. So you have a little bit of that EU context, and then kind of overpin everything with that EU policy and how it fits in with overall EU goals. So you want to try and avoid it being too kind of Irishy when you're writing an EU funded application. Ensure pan-European dissemination, so it can be all about the impact that it's going to have here in Ireland. You need to ensure that not only will you and your partners disseminate it in your respective countries, but you will also look at how you can make sure that wider Europe benefits from these approaches or from your learnings. And a really good way to do this is to partner to join EU networks. Many of them are free. So I've said this before at many different trainings. I'm sure many of you've heard it, but there is an EU network for everything. The Wheel used to be part of a European network of network associations called ENA, E-N-N-A. So that's an example. There is an EU network for everything, and many of them are very happy to help disseminate kind of results of projects. So the more you can think about how are we going to reach all of Europe with this, and do like something simple like bringing in a kind of stakeholder partner or associated partner who, they don't necessarily get funding, but they can help you with dissemination and help provide feedback on pilots and things like that, can really help to demonstrate that this is an EU project. Explain this project, why this project should be EU rather than just nationally funded. So I think I've touched on that before, but it's shared. You're talking about things like, well, there's opportunities for shared learning and innovation, whether it's around a specific region in the case of Interreg, or whether it's pan-European in the case of other programs. it's got a connection to EU policy. If we operate at EU level, we're going to have a much increased impact. You know, these are all quite kind of logical things, but these are the kinds of things that you mentioned to justify that EU dimension. And then there's potential for broad EU impact and further development. So we have potential to work together to deliver a model, or to develop a model or an approach or a set of practices or an output of some kind that we can then disseminate throughout the EU, maybe with the help of a network partner, like the Network of Network Associations, for example, or a relevant partner to the topic of your project, or maybe one of your partners, one of your full project partners, you know, is part of one of these networks or has a big EU network, whatever it is. You have this broad potential for broad EU impact. And maybe, you know, as I said before, maybe this project is just the first step, and, you know, the next project will look at bringing in even more partners. So these are all just tips for how, you know, when we talk about that EU dimension and how do we justify this as an EU project, these are the kinds of things that they're looking for. It's the policy, it's the pan-European context, it's the EU-wide dissemination, it's the benefits of EU collaboration in terms of learning and impact, and it's the potential for even further EU impact down the road. If you mention all of those things, you will have addressed the EU context. But I did say that, you know, when we talked about linking to EU policy, that can be a bit intimidating in terms of, well, how do I do that? And I don't necessarily know about all these different EU policies. And, you know, there's millions of EU policies. How do I even get started? Well, it is actually very easy. As I said to Patrick, they give you loads of hints in the call document. They tell you exactly what they want to hear from you, and they ask you specifically in the application, you know, what they want to see from you in order to give you points. So, for example, I just took a random example. This is a call that's open now. It's for proposals to protect and promote the rights of the child. That's a little screenshot from the funding and tenders portal, the EU funding and tenders portal. It's through the SERVE program. So these are all little screenshots. Further down the screen, you can see a section of the scope of the call, where it says, and they tell you right here and now, this call for proposals will contribute to the implementation of recommendations of the EU strategy for the rights of the child. So that's the policy that they want you to tie your project in. But you can look for more information by clicking on that call document. And then when you read the call document, you see something like this. This is a screenshot of the call document, where they tell you, one of the first things they tell you, number one, background of the project. The Commission adopted the EU strategy for the rights of the child, and this is a funding program that's going to help deliver on that. And then they give you the hyperlinks where you can just click through and see all the policies that they're talking about. So when we talk about linking it to EU policy, that might sound intimidating, but it's not, because it's right there. If you click on, you know, throughout this whole document, it's full of footnotes of all the different, I suppose, policy and research that has informed the need for this call for proposals. And all they're asking for you to do is demonstrate how your project will deliver on those, kind of tying it back into the very reason why they issued this call to begin with. So if you were to click on that first link, it brings you to the website for the EU strategy for the rights of the child. And this is a comprehensive website that explains every single part of the strategy, and it would be very easy for you to say which part of the strategy your specific project is going to further, how it's going to complement it. So, you know, when we talk about things like, oh, linking it into EU policy, that can sound complicated, but it isn't. And they give you loads and loads of hints as to how you can do that in the text of the application, in the questions that they ask, and in the call document. Another kind of example of this is kind of within the application is how they ask questions. They ask questions specifically to give you hints on how you should answer them to maximize your points. So this is where you use this thing called the keyword method. This, you know, the EU is a little bit renowned for long, complicated questions in their application forms. Not always, but a lot of programs do use, you know, they kind of ask you 5 questions in one, which can get a little bit frustrating, but ultimately they're trying to help you. They're giving you loads of keywords that it's like, if you mention this in your answer, that means we can give you points, essentially. Like, this is exactly what we're looking for. So one thing that really helps, whether it's an EU project or whether it's a national project or any other type of project, is to use this kind of keyword method to help break down long application questions and ensure that you're hitting all of the key points necessary to maximize your score. Like, this is the mistake that I often see when I'm reviewing applications, is where they haven't answered the question. So, and often like I put in a little comment when I'm reviewing and I'm like, this is great. This is all very fascinating information, but it's not the answer to the question. You know, put it somewhere else, because this, you need to answer the actual question. And it could be the best piece of text in the world, but if it doesn't answer the question, they can't give you any points for it. So just to bear that in mind, we're going to look at this keyword method. So this is an actual question from an EU funding application. So it's an example question. So it's on communication, dissemination, and visibility of funding. This is a key part across, you know, their funders. They want to make sure that their investment is spread throughout Europe and that their investment is acknowledged through visibility of funding, that the fact that the EU did fund this. So, and there'll often be points specifically for this kind of part of the project. So it's not something you want to overlook, but it is something that people commonly overlook because they don't see it as important. They'll be like, oh yeah, we'll figure out that once we're funded. Let's focus on the innovation of the project. No, you have to focus on this because they asked you about it. So the question is, describe the communication dissemination activities which are planned in order to promote the activities and results and maximize the impact, to whom, which format, how many, etc. Clarify how we will reach the target groups, relevant stakeholders, policymakers, and the general public, and explain the choice of the dissemination channels. Describe how the visibility of EU funding will be ensured. That's one question. So that can be a little bit overwhelming, and you're thinking, gosh, like, you know, how do I start? And, you know, that's about 10 questions in one. But as I said, these are all hints. It's like, mention all of this stuff and we will give you points. It actually would be harder if they just said, describe the communication dissemination activities, because then you're left guessing about, you know, well, what specifically do they want me to talk about? But at least the EU is very thorough and they will tell you what specifically they want you to talk about and where they're going to be giving you points. So in this method, if you're using the keyword method, what I always kind of advise is using as many headings and bullet points as possible, so that, you know, as I said, evaluators are people at the end of the day. Nobody wants to be sifting through kind of walls of text and trying to see, you know, did they answer the question here? You want to make it, again, I keep kind of repeating this, abundantly and unavoidably clear. Remember, they're reviewing hundreds of these, so you want to make it easy for them to see that you have actually answered the question. So using things like, you know, highlighting what are the key words, so that I can make sure that I'm mentioning them in my answer, so that they can easily say, okay, we asked for this, they've said this, excellent, full points, you know. So the first thing you do is have a look at this. You might have been looking at it for a while now. I'll show you what I would have highlighted as the keywords now, and we can see if they're the same as what you would imagine are the keywords from this example question. So what I would do is underline these. If I was answering this question, I'd be like, right, what they want to know is communication dissemination activities, how we're going to maximize impact, who are our target groups, which dissemination channels are we going to use to reach which target groups, and the visibility of the funding. So these are my headings. These are my core points that I want to get across in my answer. So now let's have a look. And this is a tight fit on this slide. This is an example of how you might answer this question in a way that definitely reaches those 5 points. So I made up a fictional project here. So target groups, that's the first thing you need to define to make it very, very clear. So primary target group, youth workers and young people with fewer opportunities, age 12 to 17. Again, like that's when we talked about being specific about your target groups, that's pretty specific, but this is a fictional project. You might have an even more specific target group. Secondary are youth organizations, potential multipliers, policymakers. And then I look at the communication dissemination activities. I've broken them down into online, face-to-face, and using multipliers, like so stakeholder networks that have the potential to further impact. And I've looked at which target group will reach through which activity. So for example, social media and online stuff might be more geared towards younger people. Face-to-face events might be more geared towards youth workers. You know, you use what makes sense in your project, but you can see that for each communication and dissemination activity, I specified which target group we would reach through that. Then I'd have a little bit about impact, because remember, they specifically asked about impact, how to maximize the impact. So what is the goal of the dissemination? What difference will it make? For example, you might say something about, you know, our dissemination, our goal, the impact that we want to achieve through dissemination is mainstreaming project outputs and results, sharing learning, gathering feedback for further project development. How many people do you want to reach? I would put an exact number on that when we talk about KPIs. I mean, if you have a network of whether it doesn't matter whether it's 10,000 followers across your newsletters and your social media and, maybe events that you have a year. It doesn't have to be that many, but just imagine that it is that. And your other partners have this exact same, and you have 5 partners. You can say, okay, we'll reach 50,000 people through our dissemination activities. And you might also want to mention, well, who's going to be, how many people do you want to reach? Who will measure and report on that impact? So you might include a staff profile here. You'll say, oh, our German partner is going to manage and report on all of our dissemination, and they're going to be in charge of monitoring it throughout the project. And they have a very qualified member of staff. They have a direct, a comms manager. This is a little bit about them and their track record of doing this for previous projects. And then for visibility of EU funding, because remember they asked about that specifically, you're going to look at acknowledgements of EU funding will be highlighted in all project communications in line with funder requirements. This German partner, this fictional German partner who's in charge of dissemination, will be responsible for ensuring that this is implemented and monitored throughout the project. So that's a typical, this isn't an exact science, obviously. This is something that I've kind of that I've kind of come up with, but this is a way to make sure that it's pretty unavoidable and kind of a no-brainer that you have hit on all of the things that they asked you to do, and you're answering the question thoroughly. So if there's however many points for each of those headings, you've hit them, you've addressed them. So they don't really have much of an excuse not to give you your full marks there, and that's what you're aiming for with each project. And also as an evaluator reading hundreds and hundreds of pages of this, which would you rather? A wall of text where all of this stuff is there, but it's just buried in a paragraph somewhere, and you have to read really closely to make sure, okay, did they or did they not answer that? Or it's all nicely collected there under nice, neat headings and bullet points so that it's very easy to scan. So it's all about trying to kind of make their life a little bit easier. With that, I'm almost at the end of these tips and tricks, but this is just general good practice in writing, regardless EU or otherwise. What we've looked at for so far is more kind of geared towards EU, but in general, for good practice in writing, you're looking at some further tips are things like mirroring their language. So when we talk about the kind of language that we use, if they're using specific kind of terminology for the target group or for what they want to achieve, even if you would use different terminology in your everyday work, use their terminology back at them, because it establishes a sense of understanding and that people are on the same page. So obviously you don't want to copy and paste like whole paragraphs of text, because that would look a bit strange, but just make sure you're kind of echoing that kind of language back at them, so that it communicates that there's an understanding between the funder and the applicant. Assume the reader knows nothing. Again, these are just little mistakes I think that people do when they're writing projects. But sometimes I'm reviewing projects and they're using jargon and abbreviations that I've never, they're unique to their specific area of work. Yesterday I was reviewing an organization that kept talking about DESH schools. Like, that doesn't mean anything to an EU evaluator. Like, what's a DESH school? So, it's just taking time to clarify what it is you're saying and avoiding jargon. There's also sometimes, like, we're all experts on our individual areas, and we kind of assume that people know or understand the problems that our communities are facing. That's not necessarily true. So you kind of assume that the reader knows absolutely nothing, avoid jargon, define your abbreviations, because you want to make it easy for them to read. Good writing in general is to use the active voice, but particularly in grants, this is, we've all seen Microsoft Word correcting us on this, but it's very, very important for grants to use the active voice. So things like, we will create a new program, as opposed to a new program will be created. Like, a new program will be created kind of seems like, oh yeah, someone will do it, like we'll figure it out, at some point. That we will create a new program insinuates, authority and assertiveness and kind of active participation, and it just communicates more confidence. Similarly, you want to remove we think, we believe, we feel, we will aim. Like, when I'm reviewing applications, all I'm doing is crossing these things out. If you're putting yourself forward as, we are confident leaders in this space, we know we can deliver in this project, we're experts on our subject matter that we're proposing here, like, act like that. This is like, we think this is a problem. No, it is a problem. If you're the expert and you're saying it's a problem, then say it like that. We believe this could be a good solution. Like, that's not really good enough. This is the solution. You have to demonstrate confidence. And you know, the worst one is, we will aim to do this. No, it's you either will or you won't. Are you going to do this in the project? Again, from the evaluator's perspective, that doesn't instill them with a great deal of confidence. If you're like, oh yeah, we're going to aim to do this, like, no, are you going to do it or not? Because this is a lot of money that we're potentially giving you here. So it's a will or won't situation. So again, it's just about instilling confidence. A lot of the time what you end up doing is writing the application and then going back and removing all these things afterwards, because it's just how, you know, people talk, but it is important. I've touched on this in the previous thing: headings, subheadings, bullet points. Sometimes the applications won't even allow you to do that. They don't allow for formatting, like if it's an online portal, in which case, you know, there's nothing you can do about it. But if at all possible, do try and avoid those kind of walls of text. Like I said, evaluators are people, they're going through hundreds and hundreds of pages. If you can make their life a little bit easier for them and make it easy for them to give you points, why wouldn't you? You know, there'll always be some places where it requires kind of long, wordy answers, but if you can break it down and make it easy to scan, why not? And it encourages you to kind of use your word count wisely, be succinct, be assertive, cut down on fluff that isn't really adding anything, and be more succinct. And then proofread. This is usually the step that, like, you know, I admit that I skip this one a lot because I'm kind of rushing for a deadline. But ideally, you would, of course, always try and proofread it and allow proper time for that. Again, you're trying to make the evaluator's life easier, trying to make your language easy to understand, and trying to communicate professionalism and a sense of like authority. Nobody's going to begrudge you a typo, but if at all possible, it does look better, obviously, if it's a well-written document. And try and get a colleague to proofread it, because it's very hard to proofread your own writing, especially if you've been stuck looking at it for ages. Just very quickly on circulating graphs, again, if you use that cloud-based system, you don't have to deal with loads of attachments. Balancing, you know, totally depends on your individual approach. Some people write, if you're writing with partners, write it really collaboratively, like one partner answers one question, another partner answers that question, totally fine. Other people write it and then, you know, say, you know, German partner, put in something here, and, you know, totally depends. But you do want to avoid the kind of too many cooks situation where it looks like it's been written by about 10 different people. So I always say somebody should be in charge of putting a cohesive voice and kind of putting manners on it, I suppose, and making it cohesive and making it easy to read and making it evidently not you know, a mess. So somebody should have to do that, but obviously all of your partners, of course, have to add in there. You can't know, you know, about their area of expertise or how to write about, you know, they should all take responsibility for writing certain sections or work packages or things themselves. Ideally, again, you'd allow for 2 rounds of draft circulation. You'd be like, here's the first draft, any comments, they make their comments, incorporate the comments. Here's the next draft, everybody happy, they have their last chance to say anything. And then I suppose you have the right, you know, I've incorporated all that feedback, I'm going to submit it now. Are you happy? We talked in the last one when we were talking about EU partnership development about speak now or forever hold your peace, because if we get this funding, you know, we're not going to be, there's no place for people to turn around and say, oh, well, I didn't know we were supposed to do that. And, you know, I never agreed to this. That's not going to happen. They've signed off, they're happy with it. Allow them to give feedback on the application, of course, during the phase where you're circulating it. Make sure your partners understands and agree to their roles. So that's and again, final draft, complete the final budget before submission, get sign off. Again, it's just making your life easier down the road. You know, is everybody happy? I'm going to submit this now, and make sure that you have them, preferably by email, saying, yes, I approve, you know, go for it, because then if they change their tune later on, you can remind them of that nicely. Allowing time for proofing, and if you like, you can allow time for Access Europe to review. So if you give us enough notice, like I said, I just reviewed an application yesterday, so we're more than happy to have a look for it. And what we're looking for, we're not the experts on the topic at all. We won't go near, you know, the topic and your actual expertise and your work. We just have a quick look at it from is the EU dimension in there? Is there good, you know, dispersal of kind of tasks and responsibilities? Are they answering the question? Is a lot of it, you know, have they we're just looking at opportunities where you can maximize your points a little bit. So we're more than happy to do that if you give us enough notice. So if you're thinking of going for any of them, please get in touch with us. And then submission very quickly, because I think I am going over time a little bit, and we want to hear from Mary, who's our case study. Allow plenty of time, flag technical issues early, and record evidence. This is, doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes when you're using those online portals, it's being inundated and they tend to crash a bit, particularly very close to the deadline. So if you do have a crash or something, just take screenshots, get in touch with the national agency and say, like, obviously you're not responsible for that if their system crashes, but just make sure, don't panic, record evidence, and get in touch with them and say, look, we're having this technical difficulty, we can't submit or whatever. It doesn't happen often, but in case it does. But again, if you allow plenty of time and aren't leaving it to the last minute, then it's no big deal if you're having technical issues. And also you're less likely to have technical issues because the platform won't be under so much pressure. Make sure you have all your relevant info. We went through that already, from your partners, save proof of submission and your final versions and any other evidence that you need. Tidy up all your files and inform your partners. Right, it's submitted. Hopefully, I'll keep you up to date. Hopefully we'll be in touch in a couple of months and ready to work together. So that's a process that works well for us, for the wheel, when we're writing projects that, as I said, it's not an exact science, but these are things that I always consider when I'm writing grants that I said I would share with you and that have been very successful in the past, and kind of common mistakes that I see when I'm reviewing grants. But very important that we hear from another organization that have been really excellent at getting funding, have had lots and lots of different European projects and really good success with their European programs. So we have Mary Moynihan here, who is the writer, director, theatre and filmmaker and artistic director for Smashing Time's International Centre for the Arts and Equality. So we're going to hear a little bit about their approach to EU project writing and what's worked for them. So Mary, when you're ready, we can hand over to you.
Emma, we would start with the video.
Oh, yes.
Yes. And, and could you start it from minute 7:51 and just let it go until the end?
Yeah, sure. No worries.
Great. That's excellent.
Okay, 1 second. Okay, so Mary sent us this video, which I will play now, and hopefully everybody will be able to hear it.
The process of dehumanization reminds us that the worst is always possible. Despite our pledge of never again, our warnings were in vain. After the massacres in Cambodia, there was Africa. After Rwanda, it is Darfur. It is time to find solutions so that the resolutions and principles of the United Nations may be respected in all conflict situations. The international community and all individual states must assume their responsibility. They must take the necessary steps to fight against other genocides, which must be recognized and whose victims must be heard. All those who committed and commit mass crimes must be judged and sanctioned. I would wish for all people to know respect, to respect one another and reject violence, anti-Semitism, racism, hatred, reject all forms of discrimination. The Shah is our memory. But its legacy is yours.
Great.
Very powerful video there. Mary, do you want to give us a bit of background on that and on Smashing Times?
Okay, thank you very much, Emma, and I'm delighted to be asked to speak today. It's a pleasure to be here, and I just wanted to show that piece because it's a part of a film that we made as part of a European funded project, and it's called Remembering the Show, and it was adapted from a speech by French woman Simone Veil. So I'll just very briefly talk a little bit about who she was. She gave that speech to the UN General Assembly in 2007, and it was actually about the Holocaust and in memory of victims of the Holocaust. And she was a French Holocaust survivor. She was 16 when her family were deported from France to the concentration camps where her parents and her brother died in the camps, and Simone and her two sisters survived. So after the war, Simone went on to become a French lawyer and politician, and she actually became Minister for Health in France, where she presided over the first bill legalising abortion in France. And she fought to defend the rights of women and prisoners and children, and she became the first president of the European Parliament. So Simone Veil, a woman, was the first president of the European Parliament in 1979. And she made it her legacy to say that we need to keep talking about the Holocaust and the atrocities of World War II, and to talk about those stories so that we could ensure that tolerance and respect for people are what becomes important in society. And we made that short film as part of the European project called Forgotten Voices. So I'm going to maybe give a few tips about how we approach writing our grants, but just to give you the structure of one project we did, which was Forgotten Voices. And that was funded by what was Europe for Citizens, which is now SERVE, the Citizens Equality Rights and Values Programme. And we were lead partner on that, and we had 3 other partner organisations. IFES Co-op from Spain, which was a trade union organisation, and then 2 universities, one from Poland and one from Germany. And we find particularly it's very good for projects to have a diversity of partners. So for example, in that project, we had 2 universities, we had a trade union organisation, and then we had an arts organisation. And that can be very interesting and helps a project because you have people bringing different skills to the work. And in terms of the structure, we have found that if you keep your structure for your projects in a way clear, very clear what the structure is, how the project works, the more we simplified our structure so that it was clear what we were doing, we found that helped us with funding. And it's not to say that there's not a lot of detail in the project, it's just being clear about how each stage rolls out. So for example, most of our projects are basically, we use creative processes of theatre, film, online digital technologies and social media to remember stories from the past. So this project, Forgotten Voices, was about remembering stories of courage and resilience from the Holocaust, telling those stories to the public through films, through theatre and through a book, and then using the film and the theatre process to bring people together to generate discussion on the values the stories are bringing up and how those values are linked to the EU today. So we're very focused on the values of the EU and what the EU stands for. You know, that could be solidarity, it could be peace, it could be rights, as well as economic integration. The EU is a lot more than that. And we're basically using storytelling to generate discussion in people's lives today around what the EU means. And Forgotten Voices was basically each partner gathered stories. So you're taking stories from each partner country. There was 5 stories from each partner country. The stories were put into a book, and then the book is available online. And then the stories were given to artists to create the short film, and I created the short film because I was very inspired by Simone Veil's story and I wanted to tell her story. And we also created a play on the life story of an Irish woman called Margaret Carney Taylor. And you can, you know, if you go to the Smashing Times website, you can find out more about Margaret Carney Taylor, because she was an Irish woman who lived in Spain during the Spanish Civil War and Second World War, who rescued hundreds of people from Nazi-occupied Germany, but yet her story is very unknown. And we created a play about her story, and her story is about what you do for strangers and the idea of standing up for the rights of strangers. So they're the values we're interested in. And I think if I was to summarize the project, I would say that what we did was, when we're doing work that's linked to the European Union, we try to integrate it into our own work practices. So for example, we run the Dublin Arts and Human Rights Festival, and what we do then is if we're creating events that are happening as part of our European projects, we show them as part of our Arts and Human Rights Festival. And just to say on that, we found at a certain point, at the moment we are lead partner on 4 European projects and associate partner on 15 European projects. But we discovered at one point that we were doing so many events for different projects that we said, what happens if we do them all together at the same time? We could bring everybody from the different European countries to Dublin. And that helped us create the Dublin Arts and Human Rights Festival. So I thought that was an interesting way to link the work we were doing in a European context with the work that's happening on a national context. And I think the more you can do that, I personally think that's a good way to go. And then I suppose around the activities, we always have a clear structure around how we do project action plans, how we do timelines. We have a very strong process around monitoring and documentation and evaluation. We have we do an outreach program, and we have a structure for how we do our outreach work, which goes into our funding applications. And then we also have, you know, our communications and dissemination campaign. I have to say all Emma's tips and pointers are brilliant, and we would concur with all of them, and she said a lot of what we would say. But again, it's sitting down, and even before you get to your application, it's sitting down and working out what is your communications and dissemination approach, what is your outreach approach, who are the groups you work with, what are the particularly for Serve now, they're very much, their applications have become much more complex and complicated. I think Your for Citizens was much simpler. I do wonder, should organisations get together and put in a few letters to the EU and say, can you please simplify your application process? Because it is unfair, particularly on smaller arts organisations. There was a campaign, you know, artists have campaigned here with the Arts Council in Ireland, and their funding applications are becoming more simpler because it can be a form of exclusion if funding applications are too difficult for organisations to do. And I think that's an important point. But we have found we need to sit down and work out what are our processes before we get to the actual grant. So in terms of just simple tips, and I think a lot of these have been said, but one thing we would say that's very important are your partners, because when you get into running the projects, having partners that you trust and get on with is just key to making the project work successfully. And in relation to that, we would say spend time getting to know your partners, join networks, join partner searches, send out letters to other organisations saying, hey, we're looking to partner in an application. Would anybody like to get in touch with us? We found by just putting the word out there, and Frida went and did, Frida's our company manager, she initially went and did a training program initially around funding grants, and on that training program she met other organisations. We've also joined a couple of European networks, and we would go and visit those networks when they meet, and we would get to meet other partner organisations. So that way of getting to meet other partners is important. And I would say too that what we've done in our company is, if one person is a brilliant networker, they get that job. If one person is brilliant at writing, right, you're the lead writer on the grant applications. If someone else is good at the finance, so we have divided up the roles that way. But like Emma said, if we're doing a funding grant, we'll have someone working on the different parts of the application, but there's always one person who pulls it all together. So they have that, they can see the clear line to make sure everything fits into the overall structure of the grant, if that makes sense. Because sometimes the grant forms can be so complex and you're putting things in that everything mightn't match up, and somebody needs to make sure that that's all clear and they have a really good understanding of the project. Let me see. I would say it's just a small thing that I do. If I was doing a funding grant, what I would do is go in and I would copy out what the funder is looking for. And Emma has talked about this. So I would copy it out, all out, what the call is and what their aims and objectives are, the funders. And I would put it into a Word document, and then I would edit it down until I have like a 1 or 2 page summary of what exactly they're looking for. And then I would take that and integrate that into the structure of our project. So we would have our structure for our project before we even get to the application form completely worked out, and integrate the two together. So their words and what they're looking for is in your project description, if if that makes sense. And then when we've done that, then we go to the funding grant and then start to fill it in. And I suppose then what I would say too is, so be clear in your structure and be creative. I find too that I go, if there's a funding grant, I'll go and read up who got funded before. And I'll try and find out as much as I can about different projects that got funded before. And then I'll steal like an artist. I'll take creative ideas and integrate them into our project design to try and find a creative way to do what we want to do that fits their brief. And again, like Emma said, the keywords are a key part of that. And I suppose then the one thing too is that it's being brief. So like I've noticed a lot of our European partners, when they're doing grant applications, they use bullet points. So they're very brief, but yet they're very detailed. So that's a paradox. How do you be brief and how do you be detailed at the same time? So that's a skill, working that skill out. And the other thing is just keep doing funding grants. Even if, it's great to do one and get rejected and then get the feedback and then you do it again. And you just get better and better at it as it goes on. And talk to others and share ideas is really important. So I think, I'm not sure how much time I have, Emma.
No, that's perfect. Yeah, look, I think you've hit loads of main points there, and it's always very interesting to see what a successful project looks like as well, and what's kind of possible through it. And I was scribbling down loads of things there. You had loads of like key points. I suppose it is an investment. You're probably not going to, well, there's loads of people who are successful their first time, but don't let it hit you too hard if you're not successful your first time. These funding programs run for 7 years. It's not a lost piece of work then that it's like, oh, that was a waste of time. Not at all. You can always adapt and you'll reuse that text, you'll reuse different ideas and elements again. So think about it as a kind of long-term investment, I suppose. I scribbled down like definitely having your good systems in place before you go near the application is really excellent. And if you're struggling to set up systems or understand what do I need and what is a dissemination system and what is a monitoring system, get in touch with Access Europe and we can help you do that so that you have these things in place. And then it makes it easy to talk about it in the grant, because if you're trying to write a grant and they're asking you about systems you don't have and you have to try and make it up as you go along, that is kind of intimidating and difficult. Whereas if you have the systems, it's easy to talk about them. And definitely incorporating it into your existing work. Absolutely, if you want to get real value out of the project, it has to contribute to your mainstream work and be strategic and use it cleverly. Like, I always say to people, EU funding, it doesn't fund business as usual. You're not going to get your core funding, but there's lots of things that you are doing or that you want to do that can be framed as projects and that can be highly complementary to what you're doing, but it's just kind of structured in a slightly different way. And definitely the point about the overcomplicated application systems, I would 100% agree. And that would be something that we would be very happy to support if there was any kind of, and certainly we'll be communicating it back that, it is not very inclusive to have that some programs, not all of them, but some programs do have very complicated systems. Some have simplified and some have made it more difficult. And so we'd like to get to a point, hopefully, where all of them are simplified and accessible to everybody. But yeah, excellent points. Really good. Thank you so much, Mary. It's always really, really nice to have you hear about your amazing success with projects. It's very inspiring, I think, to everybody. We did have a couple of questions that come in. If you do have any other questions for me or for Mary or for Patrick, please take the opportunity now to put them in the chat. We had a couple of questions for you, Patrick, that we'll come back to. I have to find them in the chat now. It was about, is there a database of potential partners? Oh, is Interreg always cross-border? So partnership is essential. I think yes is the answer, but I'll ask you the other question as well, Patrick, then. In which case, is there a database of potential partners? So yeah,
like you said, the Interreg is cross-border, but and this can be quite complicated, but generally speaking, there's a thing called Interreg A, B, and C, and Interreg A is cross-border, so it's usually about like peace and reconciliation, and the one we'll be most familiar with in Ireland is the peace program between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So, and the new peace program is called Peace Plus. So as far as I know, I don't know that much about it, but I know I think it's only counties on the border that are eligible for it. There maybe is a case to be made. I'm not too sure, but as far as that's the area. Interreg B then is called transnational. And I think I mentioned in the presentation, Ireland is eligible for 3 transnational program areas. So you have Northern Periphery and Arctic, Atlantic area, and Northwest Europe. And that if you go on their website, you'll see when you go on about the project, they'll have a map, and that shows you the geography of the. But generally speaking, Ireland, because it's quite a small country, is eligible to be in all those in all those areas. So if you were in an Interreg transnational program, for let's take, say, for example, Atlantic area, then more than likely there'll be at least 1, if not 2 Irish partners. Then you'd have a partner in France, Spain, and Portugal. And I suppose it's actually one thing I forgot to mention in my presentation. That's actually probably, as well as you trying to solve the problem and that it aligns with the theme, the geographical spread in Interreg is really important for the so you could have the best project idea in the world, but actually if you don't have a good geographical spread of partners, the chances are it won't get funded. So that's actually and that comes back to building up the partnership, and that's actually where it can be quite time consuming, because you're trying to find the right organization in another partner area. But that's where the national contact points should be able to help you get partners. So, and then just to say, the last remaining Interreg program is Interreg C, and that's the only Interreg program that actually covers all of Europe. So you could be a partner with partners in any country in Europe and Eastern Europe. But so, for example, in the transnational programs, you're not going to be a partner with someone in Romania or Hungary because they don't fit with the Atlantic area, for example. But Interreg Europe, you do, it's all of Europe. So yeah, that's up. And then what was the second question again?
Just around databases. I think the Southern Region Assembly has one for Northwest Europe, but I don't know if they're one for each Interreg program.
Yeah, so I suppose a database, it's a bit so similar to Access Europe. The Southern Regional Assembly have their own like kind of newsletter and network where they kind of promote programs and things like Interreg Northwest Europe. So if you go on their website, you could sign up to that. It's kind of similar to Access Europe. But we have one as well. We've recently launched it called EU Funding Network. So if you want to sign up and get newsletters, that's supposed at an Irish level. At a EU level, the only one that has like a database or a directory kind of project ideas is that Interreg Northwest Europe. So it'll be interesting to see. I think it's called something community, Interreg Northwest Community, and it's like a specifically built platform. So if you Google it, Interreg Northwest Europe Community, you can go on there and you can put in your details and your profile. And the whole idea is that you put up your profile, so people might come to you as a potential partner, but also other partners post their ideas, project ideas up there, so you could actually go in and get an idea of what the project is. Unfortunately, the other Interreg ones don't have a database, but the best thing really to do is to they all have some sort of either networking event or webinars, and that's usually the best thing to do is and sometimes you might not have a project idea. You might say like let's take, for example, like the community garden thing or something like that there that you work, or social farming or something like that there. Or you work in like tourism, or you're like a tourism body, you might just contact them and say, this is what we do, we're interested in the project in ABC. Okay,
yeah, absolutely. And just if people are worried about, I think people sometimes worry a lot about partnership for projects, and all of them are different. The Interregs, you explain them there, they have different, depending on whether they're A, B or C, they have different partnership requirements. There are some national ones, so you're looking at things like LEADER and ESF, can be national, and there are certain serve calls that can be just national. It really varies from program to program. If you go to the Access Europe website, we research all of the different programs that are out there, and we have a monthly newsletter that are applicable to civil society across all programs, Interreg, Serve, Erasmus, the whole lot. And we always kind of specify if they require partners. We did do, our last session was on partnership building, and that provides all kinds of tips about how to find partners, how to build really effective partnerships. You'll get the recording of that in the follow-up. And it has lots of tools. Some of the databases, the partner finding database, are specific to a program, like that one, but that's just for Northwest Europe. Others are more general. There's ones that are specific to youth. There's ones that are specific to Horizon. There's all these kinds of ones. Our partnership database, which we might mention in a moment, we'll wrap up now very soon, but that's just showcasing Irish civil society to Europe, and people can upload their profiles, and then we promote it out into the Europe in the hope that they can kind of be invited into more projects. And it's also a communication tool that if you're reaching out to partners yourself, you could say, here's our profile. It's all about, this is what we're all about. This is what we're interested in EU funding wise. So we'll share that with you in the follow-up as well. But I suppose don't let partnership trip you up. There's loads of support there. We've done that training. There's lots of different tools. Access Europe itself has a tool. If you're interested in partnership, just get in touch with us, and we can certainly provide kind of wraparound helps. And then the national contact points themselves are always very helpful as well in terms of helping with partnership. So that's great. I think that's all the questions we have. We're going to wrap up, but I know, Emily, you just wanted to kind of just remind people of this Access Europe supports that are on offer. So yeah, we have just a quick slide there, and then we'll finish.
Sorry. So these are just an overview of the supports that we offer within Access Europe. So we provide updates on EU funding programs and upcoming funding deadlines. So as Emma mentioned, we have a free monthly newsletter where we trawl through all the various EU funding programs and present the calls that we think are most relevant to Irish civil society organizations. And you can sign up for the link that will be provided in our follow-up email. We also have a Twitter account where we're constantly updating on different kind of events that are coming up that might be of interest to you, including our own events. And you can also find the recordings of our previous events on our Access Europe YouTube channel. And then we also provide one-to-one advice, application support, and signposting to the appropriate national contact points where you can get more in-depth advice on your application. So if you want to avail of this advice, then you can just email us at europe@wheel.ie, and we're happy to set up a call with you. And then we provide networking opportunities, and that is generally through the partnership platform that Emma mentioned. I think Christina posted a link to that in the chat. And we will also include a link to the partnership platform in our follow-up email, so you can create your own organization's profile. And we will promote that profile and the platform to organizations throughout the EU so that they can reach out to you and invite you into funding opportunities. So I think that's it from us.
That's it. Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you especially to Patrick and to Mary for their excellent expertise and insights. And as Emily said, there's loads of support available if you'd like to go for something like this between the national contact points and us at Access Europe and various colleagues. You'll have loads and loads of support. So it's definitely worth doing. It's a big investment for your organization if you decide to go for it. And just get in touch if there's anything we can do to help. But that's it for today. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.